And we haven't talked a ton about where the actual, we've talked about how AIs may get smarter. We haven't talked about where would they get this power? Where would they get the ability to actually kill us? I don't know if you want to go into that at all.
Sure. Let's do it.
Yeah, this is one of those things that's a hard call exactly how. And I can give you some ideas, but I want to caveat it with figuring out how very, very smart AIs, what they would do, is a little bit like trying to figure out what technology you would face, what weaponry you would face if you were, a scientist in the year 1800 trying to predict the weapons that would come out in the year 2000.
Right.
And someone from the year 1800, a physicist in the year 1800, could say, well, I've actually looked at the efficiency of our weapons compared to the efficiency of black powder, and I'm pretty confident that they will have bombs that's at least 10 times more effective.
Yeah.
That would be right. A nuclear weapon is at least 10 times more effective.
Right.
So, sort of fundamentally, if you build AIs that are much, much smarter than humans, that have these goals and drives you didn't want, fundamentally, they can probably figure out all sorts of ways to screw the world. And probably a lot of them would be surprising to you. Probably a lot of them, a scientist today would be like, I didn't even know that was possible. Where are they even getting their energy source or whatever? Like how someone from the 1800s would be with nuclear weapons. That said, I can sort of, walk you through a handful of cases about why it would be a bad idea to make AIs that are much smarter than us with these bad drives. Humans are very bad at cybersecurity. We've already seen AIs that try to escape the lab. They're not smart enough to succeed yet, but some of them in lab environments have tried, and it's not clear whether they're doing that for strategic reasons or whether they're doing that because they're, again, role-playing a bad AI they've seen in the training data. In some sense, it doesn't really matter. If an AI is successfully escapes for strategic reasons or successfully escapes for the laughs, you still have an escaped AI. But I guess it could matter a bit in what the AI does next. But one reason to expect AIs to be very capable is they can, with computing, it's often much harder to get a computer to do something once than to get a computer to do something a lot of times, given that you've done it once. It took a long time to get computers to be able to play better than human chess, but now computers can play quite a lot better than human chess. They can beat every human on the planet simultaneously. It's quite possible that once AIs can think well at all, they can think well in extremely high volumes.
Mm-hmm.
One intuition for this is, you may have heard how much electricity it takes to train an AI.
Right.
It takes electricity comparable to a city.
Yeah.
Training a human takes electricity comparable to a light bulb. One light bulb, humans running about 100 watts. I mean, like an old incandescent light bulb, but call it 3 LEDs today, right? That's a lot less than a city, which means there's a huge potential for AIs to become more efficient than they currently are.
Right.
And so when you're asking what could AIs do, you should sort of be imagining things that can think probably better than us, things that can think 10,000 times faster than us, things that can copy themselves, things that can, once people have figured out how to make them more efficient, they can probably run on all sorts of computers much smaller than the ones they can run on today. And then you're looking at how those AIs could do something if they sort of realized they have these other weird drives they want more of, or want is sort of a tricky word there, but if you have lots of AIs like that, they're sort of driving towards these goals nobody intended. Sort of first and foremost, the way to visualize that going wrong, or a way to visualize that going wrong, is companies build automated factories that produce robots that can produce more factories and more data centers. This is something they're already talking about doing.
Right.
The heads of these labs are like, we want the whole thing automated. We want, the mining operations, the factories that produce the robots, that do the mining, that produce the data centers. We want it all automated. If you ever close that physical loop, you have, in a fairly literal sense, made a weird new species.
Yeah.
That's unlike any other life that came before it, that has, a factory phase of its life cycle, and it has a robot phase of its life cycle, and it has a data center phase of its life cycle, right? And, then we could just be outcompeted by, just like many other species have been outcompeted before. That's sort of people are literally trying to do this, and it would be enough maybe the bombs will be 10 times stronger end of the spectrum. And then from there, you can look at, biotechnology, where one reason humans can't compete with life yet in terms of the machines we're able to make is that we can't understand the genome and write our own, genetic code.
Right.
There's the genetic code in in almost all animals is very similar. It's possible in principle to find a genome for, a tree that produces mosquitoes instead of acorns as its fruits.
Yeah.
Because the biological machinery that makes, acorns is the same as the biological machinery that makes trees. There's a different DNA strand you're putting through, and the tree would need to maybe eat some of the bugs that crawl on it to get some of the right materials. But ultimately, you could have a tree that buds mosquitoes. Humans can't make that yet because we don't understand the genome. Something that could think much faster than us, that could make lots of copies of itself, could perhaps understand the genetic code much better, make its own biological organisms, synthesize those in the lab, and then there's probably all sorts of crazy stuff you can do with if you combine engineering with the stuff that life is using. In the same way that planes fly much further and farther than birds, carrying much more cargo capacity because human engineers just aren't under the same constraints of evolution. One step weirder, one step more of like the AI having powers, like using its intelligence to get much more power over the world, is like it can make its own biotech. And then you can go down from there of like what other possibilities are there. There's a lot. It looks, what the automating intelligence isn't about automating the stuff that nerds have and jocks lack. It's about automating the stuff that humans have and mice lack.
Yeah.
If you automate that, you're looking at something that can make its own technology, that can do its own scientific advancement. A lot of those things running at 10,000 times speed that can copy themselves, pursuing goals nobody intended, that would be a real problem.
Sure. I mean, I think I heard your co-author say, we as humans don't dislike ants, but when we build skyscrapers, a lot of ants get killed in the process. We're not trying to be mean to the ants. It's just not really on our list of concerns. And if we build what could amount to a species that could outcompete us, we might be the ants when they're building their equivalent of skyscrapers.
Yeah, it's not malice that's the issue here. It's just utter indifference.
Yeah.
And in some sense, a lot of people are like, this AI thing seems sketchy. In some sense, we're not seeing the public clamoring for the AI advancements. This is more a race driven by the corporate executives who say if they don't do it, somebody else will.
Right. Well, and let's talk about some of those pressures and what's going on within those companies, because that is driving all of the progress.
The folks running these companies are largely not subtle about how crazy they think the situation is. You have Dario Amodei, the head of Anthropic, said he thinks there's a 25% chance this goes very, very badly on the level of like a world-ending catastrophe. Elon Musk has said he thinks there's a 10 to 20% chance that this ends humanity. Right.
I believe he called it summoning the demon initially.
He did.
Although now he's like, let's bring on the demons, I guess.
Well, so he's actually not subtle about why, and over the summer he said, I tried to avoid this for a long time because I thought maybe this would be the end of humanity, but then I realized I could either be a bystander or a participant.
Right.
And, from the perspective of these guys, if, like everybody else is going to race, and if they think they can do a little bit better than the next guy, they're going to hop in that race. There's a collective action problem. And, I think that these 10 to 25% numbers are low for whether this is dangerous. I think this is a little bit like, if these guys are like making an airplane and folks like me are like, hey, do you guys realize this airplane has no landing gear? It might take off, but it will crash when you try to land. And it's a little bit like the engineers. They're not saying, yes, we do have the landing gears right here. The engineers are saying, Yeah, it's correct that there's no landing gear, but we're going to take off and we're going to try to build the landing gear on the fly with whatever materials we have in the air. And we think there's a 75 to 90% chance we successfully make landing gear while in the air. It's in our profit incentive to like, and like, you know, we have reasons to race that are sort of like also motivating these numbers a little bit. I'm like, okay, those guys don't have a 75 to 90% chance of building landing gear while they're on the fly. You know, that is the optimistic engineers who have never actually tried this before. They never succeeded it before. They haven't realized how hard it's going to be. Like, it's not a 75 to 90% chance that they build the landing gear on the fly. But even if they were right, are you getting on that plane? Having these sorts of conversations, because I think that's part of what these conversations are for, and that, you know, one of the big things people can do is just call their reps and say, I'm worried about where AI is going. I think it'll endanger us if these companies succeed at their stated goals. I speak to a lot of politicians on this issue. Some of them are now starting to come out and say, I think there's dangers here. There's a lot more of them who are worried but feel like they can't say it out loud because they worry it'll sound crazy, or they worry that they'll piss off, you know, the big tech lobbies. Just knowing that their constituents are concerned, I think, can go a long way.
Absolutely. And I have found you'd be surprised at how much they want to hear from their constituents. And sure, one person sending an email, calling, speaking to their a state representative of any kind, no, that's not going to change everything. But I have heard directly from the horse's mouth from a number of representatives in California, as soon as you hear from a group of people about something where there's multiple emails coming in, multiple calls coming in, they take notice of it, because they do understand that that is their job. They're not going to get reelected if they completely ignore what everyone's saying. And if there's a groundswell of concern, suddenly these leaders who are in positions to actually make decisions about this can start to do something about it.
I think smaller groups than you might think can matter more than you might think. I think a lot of folks these days are saying, if we don't rush to build it, some foreign adversary will rush to build it instead, and so we need to go full steam ahead. I think that if you think that even in the face of the huge dangers here, you should be able to look people in the eyes and say, you know, we think this has a 10% plus chance of killing you all, maybe much higher, depending which experts you listen to. We think it's worth the gamble anyway. I think you probably shouldn't be able to say that, because I think it would be crazy. And that does not mean letting adversaries do it first. Right. If you have a situation where if you do something that risks a 10+% chance of killing every man, woman, and child on the planet, and you worry that someone else is going to do that instead, the answer is not to get there first yourself. The answer is to make sure they don't do it either. That's a capability we in fact possess. The sort of smart way to do this would be through some, you know, international agreement, which can happen. You know, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty happened at the height of the Cold War, and the ideological differences between the US and the USSR were huge. But they both agreed we didn't want to die of this, right? But even if you think a treaty is not possible, we should be developing the intelligence to know who's trying to do this stuff. We should be developing the ability to sabotage it. The Stuxnet virus in 1996 shut down the Iranian nuclear facilities because our world leaders took seriously that they have to stop rogue nations from developing these dangerous capabilities. There's lots of options for stopping people from taking these crazy risks that aren't rush ahead ourselves. And at the very least, we should be signaling to the world that we think this is too dangerous, that everyone should stop, and B, developing the ability to tell which rogue actors are rushing ahead anyway, and find a way to to make that not happen, because it threatens each and all of our lives.
Nate, thank you so much for all of this. I hope that major decision makers in Washington, D.C. become aware of the issues and the dangers that we are facing. Again, the book is If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, Why Superhuman AI Would Kill Us All. And if anyone wants to follow up online to learn more about the work you're doing, where can they find you for that?
My organization, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, is at intelligence.org. And you also may be interested in some resources to help you contact your representatives at ifanyonebuildsit.com/act.